Hello friends, good afternoon and welcome to EduSite Live Lectures. Dear friends, today's topic for discussion is plant physiology. To discuss this topic, we have with us Professor Ashish Kumar Nandi. Professor Nandi is a professor in School of Life Sciences in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Without further ado, I would like welcome to Professor Nandi to our studios and request him to start the lecture. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Amrit. Today I will be speaking about plant hormone abscisic acid. So this is in continuation of a series of discussions on plant hormones, and in fact this is the fourth one. In the past three lectures I have discussed about different kind of plant hormones, their general function, and specifically I have talked about auxin and cytokinin. So, any of you whoever have listened this talk should have a some kind of idea what the plant hormones do, and as you recall, if you can recall, that both auxin and cytokinin, they do large number of different kind of aspects in plants physiology, starting from growth, development, flowering, and everything. And abscisic acid is also one of them, another hormone which is also a classical hormone, and this hormone was discovered a century ago. And so today I will speak about quite many aspects of abscisic acid, how it was discovered, how its biosynthesis takes place, homeostasis, and if time permits, about the signaling mechanisms. So let me go ahead with my talk today as I have made it. So I will begin with the slides with a specific purpose is to show you my email ID. I would request any of you is that if you have any question on whatever the topic I discuss, you can just drop a line of email with your question. I will put the question in the next class and I will tell you the answer as best as I know. If you wish also, you can send your photo. I will show you the your photo and the name and the question, and I will try to answer it. So through email I have received a few questions. So before discussing today, I will first discuss about the questions that I have received, and then I will go about and talk about abscisic acid. Okay. So can I have the first slide? Yeah, I have. Yeah. So if you see here, look here, this is my email ID. It's ASHIS_Nandi NANDI @yahoo.com. So this is my email ID, and not only the questions, if you wish to avail any kind of reading materials, you can just write an email. I will send you the reading materials. Most of the research articles that I am reading for the classes, I can email to you. So let us discuss about the questions that I have received. So today I have received a few questions, not for today's class, received quite a few questions. The questions came from a student in Himachal Pradesh. His name is Amandeep Dogra, and he actually sent a quite many questions, and today I will discuss some of his questions, and then later in the proper in the class in which I discuss about them. So this is the question he put, is that regarding auxin talk, that some of coleoptile experiments were done in dark. How did they perform the experiments? So this is a very nice questions. Because you see these experiments, actually before answering the question, let me show you the slides which he is speaking about. So this is a slide which I showed in the class of auxin, and this discovery dates back in around 1880 or so, 70 to 80. And this was first time reported by great scientist Darwin, who showed that if you have coleoptiles and if you have light falling in one side, the coleoptile bends towards the light. And also what they have shown, that bending takes place much down from the place where light is received. So, light is received in the upper part and then the effect is in the lower part. So, this was published by Charles Darwin and his son Francis Darwin, and there was another slide which I showed you. This one is a paper from Bison Jensen in 1913. What they have showed that if you keep lower part of the coleoptile in the dark and the effect can be studied on the upper part by grafting of the coleoptile tip in which the light is received. So, his question is that how did they perform the experiments? Now, the question is interesting because in that area in 1890 to say 1900 early first of 20th century, most of the research papers did not couple with a figure. So, many of the figures which later on has been drawn by hand by lot of people to explain how the experiment has been done. So, sometimes it can have your own imagination of that. So, for these experiments particularly, I was very lucky that I got one cartoon drawing from the University of Miami website. There, these two particular experiment, one was done by Darwin and Darwin 1880 and then Bison Jensen in 1913. And this diagram explains how the experiments was done. Like if you look at this coleoptile, this is bent towards light and you would see that cells are smaller in the side which is falling light and bigger in the side which is away. Now, what they have shown in this diagram that you can have a small cap which is a opaque cap, you can put it on the coleoptile that can make it dark, or you can have a ring, that ring can be passed and the ring would not, is a opaque ring which will not allow the light to come into the base, but the effect can be seen because it is slightly loose and it can bend towards it. And the later experiments which are done by a 1913 paper, they have shown that how it can be done. You can make a grafting and you can put a agar block and then place the cut tip over it. So, that is the first question of Amandeep which he asked, that how the experiments are done. The next question in the very related area, he asked that is it they used green light? Now, the answer is no, they used white light in the experiments. Again they have mentioned only light, so we would assume it is a white light and definitely not green light, because green light is the most ineffective for plants. Plants have the receptors for using red light, they have receptors for using blue light, and even they have receptors for using far red light. So, it is very less likely that the experiments they have used the green light. And also if you see, that is the time when the monochromatic light used in plant research were very limited, and only people started beginning the effect of monochromatic lights in photosynthesis. So, in all likelihood the experiments are carried out with the white light. Here another question again in auxin is that different concentration of auxin have effect on root and shoot development. Can auxin be used as a herbicide? Answer is yes. Indeed, most of the herbicides, not most, many herbicides use auxins or auxin derivatives. So, if auxin is used in higher concentration, overall growth is altered, disturbed, and often it can kill plants. And he has another question from which I will take the class lead today. In fact, he asked this question is that does ABA play a role in leaf senescence or it's ethylene. There are some contradicting information in the book. Actually, when I was thinking of preparing a lecture on hormone after auxin and cytokinin, I was thinking of any other hormone to take like gibberellic acid, ethylene or ABA. But after getting this question, I thought let me speak about ABA first and then I will speak about other hormones. So, this question is very interesting and is still relevant today, which actually how much contribution ABA has in senescence or if at all it has any in contrast to the ethylene. So, if you look into the books today, many of the plant physiology book will speak that ethylene is the hormone which contributes to leaf senescence. There are reasons behind it, and that, but interestingly the abscisic acid hormone was identified based on the experiments carried out on abscission of petioles. Specifically the experiments which were early year, it was carried out in studies where people looked into the shedding of the cotyledons. Like many plants like cotton and all, where cotyledon grows out and give out first pair of leaves like saying, they fall off quite early. Now that had been used as a model system to study how abscission takes place, and abscisic acid hormone was identified absolutely by studying how abscission of the petiole takes place. At the simultaneously, there are two different research groups. One was studying bud dormancy and another group was studying the growth inhibition effect. And eventually, all the three studies identified abscisic acid is the common hormone between them. Later on, much later in 1980s or maybe in early 70s, some papers have overruled as ethylene is the primary factor for senescence compared to abscisic acid. However, still abscisic acid is the one which contributes to ethylene and eventually to senescence. So, I will speak about that today, what is the role of how actually following a leaf abscission identified the hormone abscisic acid. So, briefly if I can show you this abscission process, you will find this is an actual picture in the left and you have a cartoon in the right. So, say this is a axillary bud, this is a leaf and this leaf will fall. So, before the leaf actually falls, there is a layer which forms called abscission layer or separation layer, and the plant, this area of the plant undergo a programmed cell death, by which the cells in the abscission zone or dies out and the terminal part falls off, and the part which attached to the main plant like this, it became quite resistant to natural infections. It gets a highly thick cell walls, gets suberized cells and become a protective layer, so that they are not vulnerable to pathogen or different insect attack. So, before this separation takes place, the cells which are over here, that separation layer, cells must undergo programmed cell death and eventual degradation of the cell wall, middle lamella for the abscission to take place. So, this slide I have showed you, this is the structure of abscisic acid, and the gray hormones are classical hormones, auxin, cytokinin, gibberellic acid, abscisic acid and ethylene. So, I am speaking about abscisic acid today. Abscisic acid discovery has been credited to Frederick Adicott, who was a professor of botany in the UC Davis, University of California Davis campus, and he did the initial work in identifying abscission inducing compound. So, he had a very interesting experimental setup, and again these papers are published much early in his career, starting from mid 20th century, and most of them did not have the figures. So, I have used some of the figures by my imagination over here. So, this is the paper I am talking about, was published in 1963 in the Science issue of 20th December. The title of the paper is Abscissin tow and abscission accelerating substance from young cotton fruit. So, this group was studying the abscission promoting factor from cotton, because cotton fruit also undergo abscission and then dehiscence, and they were studying in the cotton seedling. So, this is the picture of a cotton seedling, and this is the hand drawn picture over here. So, there are two cotyledons and a hypocotyle. So, what they did actually is they cut one petiole of a cotyledon and at the hypocotyle in a such a way that you get a 3 millimeter petiole stub and 10 millimeter stalk of the hypocotyle. This cut area was now later kept on a small holder. This is a steel holder, and that is fixed with agar. So, it would stand like this, cut area would come and stand like this, and then they applied, this is the cut area, in the cut area they would apply an weight. Now, remember, this petiole is going to fall off from here, this is the zone of abscission. Now, when you apply an weight, that will accelerate abscission, and the time of abscission was recorded. So, this experiment eventually set up was covered with a plastic dome to maintain humidity. Otherwise, what would happen, that this agar would die, and even the cut coleoptile also, cut seedling also will die very fast. So, this is the steel holder which would hold this setup, and the stump was fixed with 1.5% agar, and this is the weight. There are many different papers where they have used what they called as the weight of abscission. Like, you can slowly increase the weight and can induce abscission, or what can be done is you record the time taken for abscission. Like, you fix the weight, which is 5 gram, and then record how long it takes for the abscission to take place. And this is the cut end. So, they are working on plant extracts. To study the plant extract, what they did is they took the extract, added with 1% agar, so it will make a solid, semi-solid, and this semi-solid as a 5 microliter drop would be placed on this cut tip. So, the molecule will pass it through the petiole and would make the effect at the zone of abscission. So, this was the setup, experimental setup, and this is the paper from Adicott labs, the same paper, and just you can see what they have done is they have taken cotton fruits, young cotton fruits, and amazingly small amount, 225 kilogram of cotton fruit. So, huge amount of cotton fruit must be taken, lyophilized, extracted with 80% acetone, and then huge of solvent extractions, column chromatography, paper chromatography, and in that process they identified about 9 milligram of a substance which are they call it abscissin 2. So, you have two different kind of compound, one was abscissin 1 and another one is abscissin 2. The abscissin 2 later on turned out to be abscisic acid. So, I have talked about here about abscisic acid, abscissin 2 only. So, this abscissin was identified with the bioassay that I have explained very previous slide. So, now this is another figure from this paper of this December 1963 science paper. What they have done here is they have recorded percent of abscission over the days. Now, if you, this is the control, what they have shown that if you do not apply anything, just the 5 gram of weight, as I told you, abscission would start from the day 2 and say up to day 5 there will be about 20% abscission, rest would not be, eventually it will take much longer time period. However, it was known that GA, by then GA was identified, gibberellic acid. Gibberellic acid can promote abscission, and their AB2, if you look here, this is AB2 in a very little amount, 0.01 microgram, can enhance abscission very effectively. It starts from day 1 and within day 4 it goes almost 50% abscission. And this same abscission 2, when they are applied 0.1 gram concentration, which is even 10 times less than gibberellic acid, it was found that with before one day itself 60 to 70% leaves follow. So, abscission 2, what they identified was definitely very effective in making abscission, because even before 24 hours passes, 60 to 70% leaf would fall off with as low as 0.1 microgram of abscission 2. Now, I will speak about the work of another group which I told you that they had been working on bud dormancy. This group was spearheaded by Philip F. Waring. The Philip was in Department of Botany, University College of Wales, and his experiments was in early 1960s, and he retired in 1981, and then on request of Annual Review of Plant Physiology, he wrote an article, A Plant Physiological Odyssey. And I have taken quite a good amount of information from this article about his early experiments on bud dormancy. In fact, what actually is known, and by that time and still by many reports earlier, that many plants grow quite happily in a relatively warmer temperature. However, at the onset of winter, growth slows down. This is specifically reported in many woody plants. The woody plants, there is specific, even in the herbaceous plants also, as the temperature sets down in the winter, growth retarded. Woody plant studies had been more because the bud size is big, and people have studied on how the bud effect on the bud, how the bud growth takes place in the big plants, woody plants. This Philip's lab was studying bud dormancy in 2 big plants, one is birch, one is a sycamore, and what they and earlier others reported that during winter bud growth slows down. And eventually what they have shown, it is not the winter, not the temperature as more important, as important is actually the day length, because in winter it becomes short day and in summer the days are longer. So, their study actually showed that there is something in long day made in the plant that can promote bud growth, or in other words actually experimentally what more they have proven that in short day leaves accumulate growth inhibiting factor or bud dormancy factor. That bud dormancy factor eventually comes to the bud and make the suppression of growth. So, I will show you some of his experiments which they have shown to how bud dormancy was studied in birch plant. So, this is the plant of Betula or European birch, and this is the Acer which is sycamore, and these are the 2 large woody plant in which they studied bud dormancy. So, I will explain their work in brief what they have done. That suppose they take a defoliated bud. This is the bud where leaves have fallen off and only the bud is present. What their group have shown that if you keep a defoliated bud in the short day, the bud would be dormant. It won't grow very fast. Same bud, if you are exposed into the long days, they become active and non-dormant. Very interesting results they have found that when they take the bud with the leaf, this is the bud with the leaf. Now, if they keep it in the long day, then they are non-dormant and they are active. However, this is what actually I have written here. Suppose if they when they kept bud in the long day and leaf also in the long day, this is non-dormant. Now, when this is very interesting, when they kept the bud in the long day but leaf in the short day, then the bud is dormant. So, this may arise some questions from somebody of the mind, how did they do the experiment? How buds are kept in the long day, but leaves are in the short day. Actually, these experiments can be done in a way like you have to have a two separated chamber and there can be small hole where leaf is projected out and two different photoperiod condition can be given. Now, look at this very interesting fact here. The bud which has to grow is immaterial. The leaf which is there exposed, the next leaf, closest leaf plays the most important role. So, they concluded from the study is that the leaf when they are kept in the short day must be accumulating growth inhibitory factor or bud dormancy factor that would travel via petiole, go all the way to the bud and suppress the effect of the bud. So, these experiments actually are highly equivalent to the experiments which are conducted. Some of you may know about the experiments conducted by Russian scientist Chailakian. Chailakian, a Russian scientist who showed that the effect of photoperiod is received in the leaves and that goes to the apex for flowering. So, very similar effect, that growth inhibitory effect also are made in leaves and then it goes to the bud. So, this was some of the lines from his paper, but anyway I will just skip them. I have told you with the diagram. Now, look at their experiment. So, they wanted to isolate growth inhibitory factor from the betula leaves, and what they did is quite similar experiment wise to what the group of Adicott did in terms of isolating abscessin 2. So, they extracted leaves with 80% methanol and then followed several layers of purification, partitioned by paper chromatography, by isopropanol aqueous ammonia. Then they collected the sample which had the RF value of 0.65 to 0.95 and they eluted water for the growth inhibition study. Now, this growth inhibition study they have done on different thing in cotton seedling, in seedlings of betula instead of on the bud, on actual bud. This is what was the summary of experiment. Again, this paper did not have a figure, so I have given one figure by my imagination. Like what they have shown that, okay, this compound they have given a name as dormin, which was actually same as abscisic acid and the given name was abscessin 2 by Adicott's lab. Here what they have shown that if you try to grow seedling of bug with control, this may be the height in a given time, but if you apply dormin, the height become low, and gibberellic acid can increase the height significantly, which can be to a certain extent suppressed by the growth inhibitory factor dormin. So, this application of the inhibitor on leaves lead to suppression of the growth of the apical bud. This is what the very interesting line also which I have written down here. This application was not made it on the root, but it was applied on the leaves, and that led to the suppression of growth dormancy. So, naturally this dormin or growth inhibitory factors were travelling from leaf to the bud via petiole. So, to explain the results of this figure, like this figure which I have drawn myself with the imagination, I am showing you similar effect, but this is something unrelated. This is I have taken from a different paper which was published in International Journal of Molecular Science in 2015. Only the thing is that this is from the bud and this is seedling and this is hypocotyl. They have also studied with an inhibitor. Their inhibitor is PAC, which inhibit growth. Now, for the benefit of the student, I have taken this figure to explain what would have observed by the group of Phillips and his colleagues. So, this is the effect of dormin and this is the control plant. So, when you have dormin, they become smaller than the control plant. You apply GA, it becomes big. You apply GA plus dormin, it becomes smaller than the only GA. Like here also you can see on the hypocotyls. So, this is control hypocotyl, only inhibitor very small, only GA very big, and GA plus inhibitor in the moderate size. So, this dormin can suppress growth of hypocotyl, growth of plant, can suppress the dormin, can suppress bud growth in winter, and that can be inactivated to a good extent by a hormone like gibberellic acid. Now, quite interestingly again, what this Phillips group in University of Wales observed that the biochemical properties of dormin was quite similar to that it was observed by the Adicots group in University California Davis, UC Davis. So, eventually they have come up to the same until of course the compound was identified. This is a paper from again Phillips group on sycamore, very similar study. Now, this is the paper which first time the molecule abscisic acid was identified, again from the Frederick Adicots lab, and this was published in Tetrahedron Letters in 1965, and they identified the structure of abscessin 2 in this paper, and eventually quite quickly it was realized that this is the same dormin which was identified by others. Now, I will speak about the third factor which I told you as the growth inhibition factor. Now, this work was done on lupin by a group of scientists spearheaded by Stephen Eck at University of Adelaide, Australia. They have published a paper again in 1966, very close within a 3 years gap between 1963-66, first abscessin paper 1963 and this paper in 1966. This paper in the lupin, they were also working on abscission, but what they did actually, they realized that abscission experiment what I showed you by having a coleoptile cutting 10 millimeter, 3 millimeter and hanging a weight of 5 gram was quite tough, quite difficult. By that time Adicots group had shown that the abscessin 2 negatively interacts with auxin. So, the Stephen Eck group in University of Adelaide, what they did that for identifying abscission promoting factor, they used anti-auxin activity. So, the experiments they carried out like this, they have taken coleoptiles from Avena oat and they took 10 millimeter of cut leaves. So, this is the 10 milli, so this is the coleoptile, and this coleoptile they would cut a piece of 10 millimeter size and then they float with either auxin or they called it a lupin, which was the inhibitor from the lupinase, and they would grow for 13 hours and measure what is the new length of the coleoptile. Now, look at this data from this paper which was published in 1966. If you take a 10 millimeter long coleoptile, if you leave in the water for 13 hours, it becomes slightly bigger by 1.5 millimeter. So, it becomes 11.5 millimeter long. Now, the abscission factor which they extracted from lupin, it made very hardly any growth. So, it was 10, it became 10.23. So, hardly there was any growth of coleoptile, and this in this occasion I should also tell you that it has taken as a coleoptile which hardly divides, it is all mostly elongates, and auxin have a effect on elongation, which I also told you today and my previous auxin class. Now, if you look here at the auxin IAA, look at this, the 10 becomes 16. So, 10 becomes 15 or to 16. So, this is a tremendous growth, 1.5 time growth by auxin only, but that growth can be effectively suppressed if you apply abscission factor or lupin, and that become, in contrast to 16, it is only 13. So, eventually what I would like to tell, what I am trying to tell you is that lupin, which was identified as a growth inhibitory factor, can work as an auxin antagonist similar to the abscissin 2, it was identified by Frederick Adicott's lab. And this is a paper which again came in 1968, Science, title is interesting, it says abscisic acid, a new name for abscissin 2 or dormin. So, I told you that growth inhibition, dormancy factor and everything culminated in identifying the same molecule which is abscisic acid, and this article was jointly contributed by all the other workers like it by Kearns, Smith and Cornforth and Phillips, who all had been involved in studying several aspects of this growth inhibition or dormancy. So far what I have told you is that all the 4-5 research groups identified abscisic acid, and they have proven that abscisic acid can contribute to the leaf abscission. The first report which actually put a question on how much abscisic acid plays a role in abscission came in this paper, from this paper. This was published in Plant Physiology 1969. The title of this paper is Abscission, Role of Abscisic Acid. So, this was from the Abel's lab in Maryland. What this paper eventually showed that ABA or abscisic acid application actually induces ethylene production, and in the paper they have also discussed about the experiments that was carried out by Adicott's laboratory. Like if you recall, I will show you this diagram again by here. Look here. So, if you look at this structure again, what you will find, the setup of abscission was covered with a plastic dome for maintaining the humidity. Now, if you apply abscisic acid over this 1969 paper which showed that if you apply abscisic acid, the ethylene production increases in the plant, and ethylene is a gaseous hormone. So, the gaseous hormone now cannot escape because there is a plastic dome over there. So, eventually it can accumulate more amount of ethylene, and the abscission effect could be a joint effect of ethylene and ABA. So, I will show you the experimental details of this plant physiology paper again. Yeah, this is the paper. Now, look at this table from this paper. What they have done is, they have taken cotton and bean seedlings, and then they applied abscisic acid starting from 0, 10 to the power minus 6 ppm. No, what is the unit here? Okay, maybe I do not know, I have to check. Say milligram. 10 to the power minus 6, 10 to the power minus 5 and 10 to the power minus 4 amount of abscisic acid, and they have measured the break strength. You recall the experimental setup I told you, that you can increase the amount of weight that is required to induce abscission after given time. So, what they have shown that as you keep applying abscisic acid, the weight requirement after 24 hours is reduces. So, at 0 abscisic acid, it would need 50 grams around to break. You apply 10 to the power minus 6 milligram, it is only 47, 10 to the power minus 5 milligram, 38, and if you apply 10 to the power minus 4 milligram, then you do not need any weight, it falls off. So, abscisic acid can definitely trigger abscission. Now, at the same paper, they have also measured ethylene. Now, look at the amount of ethylene that is made in those kind of setup. So, when there was no abscisic acid was there, that is a 0.12 ppm of ethylene. Now, as abscisic acid was increased, amount of ethylene also increased by 3 times. So, the paper actually concluded that it may be the joint effect of ABA and ethylene. So, here actually they have written that we conclude from the data presented here that the action of abscisic acid on abscission of isolated explant was twofold. First, it accelerated ethylene production, and second, it increased cellulose activity. Yeah, this one actually I did not mention you with a figure. In the paper they showed abscisic acid also can increase cellulase activity. You remember that cellulase is an enzyme that is required for degradation of cellulose. The cellulose are the ones which are abundantly present in the cell wall. In fact, cellulose fiber are the strongest component which is there in the cell wall. So, for making an abscission layer, for letting the cells to die move away, the cell wall must be degraded, middle lamella must be degraded, and there for that cellulose enzyme is very important. Otherwise, if they are not removed, not degraded, it will not fall off. It may die like the heart would, but it would not fall off. So, falling off of a leaf is definitely should be coupled with cellulitic activity, and this plant physiology paper in 1969 had shown that ABA can induce cellulitic activity or cellulose enzyme activity. So, effect of ABA on abscission cannot be ruled out at all. Now, the more this is the science, this is another paper in 1976, and there are quite a many papers eventually taken away abscisic acid from the abscission. This is a paper in 1976, I will discuss much more when I talk about ethylene, but look at this figure here. What they have shown that when they took cotton plant, they kept in air, or when they induced ethylene, within 7 days all leaves fell off, whereas not a single one fell off when only it was air. So, from that time onwards, in 1976 onwards, people have shifted the focus of abscission towards ethylene, and not only this paper, there are many papers came up which showed ethylene plays very important role in abscission. However, as I am telling you that abscisic acid role cannot be still ruled out, and this is another paper which was published in PNAS, Proceedings of National Academy of Science in 1980. It is a very good paper which showed ABA also causes abscission, and what they have shown experimentally that ABA, it was already known by then that ABA promotes stomata closure. What they have shown that stomata closure itself causes ABA accumulation, abscisic acid accumulation, and ABA may indeed be the proximal cause of leaf senescence. This was actually taken as a word by word from this paper. Look at some of the graphs from this paper. What they did is they took plants and applied dark for inducing senescence, and they measured amount of chlorophyll. And kinetin, I told you, is a cytokinin. I talked quite in details in previous class. Cytokinin is already known which can inhibit senescence. So, what they found that when they apply light, L is the light, there is no chlorophyll degradation, but when it was dark or along with cytokinin, there is no chlorophyll degradation, but when only dark, chlorophyll rapidly degrades. Now, look at the same time, when chlorophyll starts degrading, at the same time ABA starts coming up. So, this is something happens concurrently, the degradation of chlorophyll along with enhancement of the ABA content. So, this is also as from the same paper where they have shown that a chlorophyll content concurrently takes place along with enhancement of the ABA content. And this is one of the very latest information from based on the latest information. This is a slide I have taken from Plant Cell Teaching Tools, which was published only last year, and that talk about how senescence is induced. So, it talks about starvation, it talks about dark and sugar depletion. Sugar depletion takes place both by starvation and dark, and all of them can eventually activate ABA. This ABA plays still predominant role in senescence along with two other hormones which are ethylene and jasmonic acid. This developmental senescence is also negatively regulated by cytokinin and positively regulated by salicylic acid. So, this is how, and so in brief what I am saying, the abscission, still abscisic acid plays very important role. So, so far what I have told you in this class is how ABA was discovered. Essentially I have spoken about three different groups which are working on different aspects of plant physiology. One group was working on bud dormancy on woody plant like birch and sycamore, which was by Philip Waring. Another group, Frederick Adicott from University of California Davis, UC Davis, working on abscission, and the third group, Stefanik from Australia, working on plant growth inhibition, and all of them eventually led to identification of abscisic acid. And abscisic acid, there are many papers which showed abscisic acid also take a crucial role in abscission of the petiole, but this work is mostly as a proximal regulator is ethylene, which is induced by abscisic acid. However, if you go by abscisic acid alone, this has major contribution in stress response and other things. So, here this is a slide again taken from a recent publication by the plant teaching tool. This abscisic acid I told you about dormancy of the bud, and related thing is the dormancy of the seeds. So, I will show you eventually that how abscisic acid affects germination. Actually, abscisic acid inhibits germination, and this part is in antagonistic interaction with gibberellic acid. In my gibberellic acid class, actually I will tell you how gibberellic acid promotes germination, and ABA is believed to work as an antagonist of gibberellic acid in seed germination, and bud dormancy I have told you in details. Besides that, it has a role in development, nutrient uptake, and stress tolerance. This is very important. This is where the abscisic acid now is the mainly focused for their function. One is the gene expression related to the stress response and stomatal aperture and the biotics response. It is believed that the biotic response is mostly negatively regulated by abscisic acid with some positive feedback, which I will tell you again. Now, I do not know, I am not sure if I will take a class on biotic stress or not, but definitely I will speak about stomatal aperture. The stomatal aperture plays very important role in management of many different kind of stresses. So, a plant, one of the visible response is shown in the plant is the stomatal closure. Like say if the plant is suffering from water loss, if the plant is suffering from high temperature, if the plant is suffering from a salinity, there is too much of salt in the soil, then it leads to the production of abscisic acid, and this abscisic acid production can eventually lead to the stomatal closure, a mechanism for the stress tolerance. So, this stress tolerance became a limelight for the abscisic acid research from 1970 onwards, and lot of experiment has been carried out and credited to Jan Jeevert from University of Michigan, Michigan State University. This Jan Jeevert's lab identified abscisic acid's role in stress response in great details. This is a paper from the Jeevert's lab which was published in 1980 in Plant Physiology again. What they have shown that a plant which is watered and versus a plant which is stressed. So, and this level is the amount of abscisic acid. Now, if you live under the stress where water is removed, then rapidly within 2 hours this abscisic acid starts appearing, and then when water is added, abscisic acid amount falls off. So, from this time onwards, which is around 1980s which I am talking about, people's focus of the abscisic acid is changed, and more of a dormancy, more of a bud dormancy or more of a growth inhibition, abscisic acid is now more known to as a stress response. At this occasion also I should tell you that abscisic acid is considered as one of the negative hormone, it is a negative regulator. Abscisic acid negatively interacts with many plant hormones like auxin in different aspects with gibberellic acids, negatively interacts with ethylene, negatively interacts with salicylic acid. So, this is a hormone which have a large number of interactor, but quite often it is a negative interaction, and this is probably something which regulate many different plant hormone response by negatively regulating them. And so, as such Of course, it has its own role. I will tell you there are so many abscisic acid responsive genes are there, which turns on by abscisic acid as for the stress management and for stomatal closure. So, there is not too much of time today. Maybe I will discuss about this is ABA biosynthesis in the next class. But so let me tell you, let me also remind you today is that I have also told you earlier, if you have any questions, anything what I have talked to you today or any of the classes I have taken so far more than 13-14 classes, you please write me an email uh, which is ASHIS underscore Nandi NANDI at yahoo.com. I am from Jawaharlal Nehru University School of Life Sciences. If you Google it, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and then if you type Ashish Nandi, my name with School of Life Science, you will get my contact details, where a phone number is also there, my email IDs are there. If you have any question on any of the topic that I have discussed, please drop a line of email. And also if you think you need a teaching material or study material, actually I have spoken about many different papers, I can email to you, and hope to see you in the next class. Okay, thank you for your attention.
I would like to thank Professor Nandi for this enriching lecture, and thank you friends for watching. Stay tuned and keep watching. Thank you.
Test questions on abscisic acid. Who discovered abscisic acid? What is the role of abscisic acid in stomatal closure? How abscisic acid and gibberellins act antagonistically? Why is abscisic acid important in plants with respect to its developmental and physiological role? Why abscisic acid is known as dormin? What are the commercial uses of abscisic acid? Describe the chemical structure of abscisic acid. How is abscisic acid transported in plants? And what is the role of abscisic acid receptors in its mechanism of action?